What's good, family? Hey, question for you. What's the best tool to maximize your real estate returns? Starts with an L. You said leverage? You're right. What's leverage exactly? Well, that's the practice of borrowing money, like when you take out a mortgage to buy a house. Wait a minute, I thought that was just debt. And why would anybody want to do such a thing? Well, Dave Ramsey and Wu-Tang know that cash rules, but using leverage, when done properly, can make more cash fools. Today on Borrow, Buy, Build, we're breaking down leverage, Tiger style. Well, I'm Matty Loans, the mortgage Gary Grice, back up in the cut with another chamber of mortgage A to Z. And this week we're swinging swords, leverage swords. Let's unlock the discipline of using leverage and review both the opportunities and costs so that you can better manage risk next time you need to borrow money. As you've been told before to diversify your bonds, using a mortgage can help you diversify your assets. By the end of this video, you'll know the fundamentals, how to make them work next time you purchase real estate. Let's make sure your grip is strong because leverage is a sword that cuts both ways, son. What comes to mind when you think of the word leverage? Well, I think a tool, just like a simple machine, like a big strong board that you can use to move heavy objects, right? Financial leverage is the same concept. It just uses debt as a tool to acquire large assets, like you would lift that heavy rock. Financial leverage will help you do two things. A, speed up the time needed to acquire assets, and B, maximize the potential returns of an investment. To accomplish this, you need to borrow funds from external sources like banks, financial institutions, and maybe even bonds. The funds borrowed are collateralized against the acquired asset. That's the utility and leverage. And now let's break down the killer B's of leverage in some illustrations with some ones and O's so that we can hit the bricks. The first B starts with borrowing funds. Instead of using solely one's own capital to acquire assets, leverage involves other people's money. That's exactly what you're doing when you apply for a mortgage to buy your home. Here, you're using the bank's money, but remember, not all debt is the same. The purpose is not just to borrow money for borrowing's sake. There is such a thing as good and bad debt, and you can tell the difference by the cues. Look at the differences between a car loan and a home loan. Why are auto loans usually 5 years or so? Well, that matches the depreciation of that particular asset. Because after 5 years of owning a vehicle, 65% of the value is gone. Borrowing money to purchase real estate usually provides appreciation year over year with a depreciation schedule that lasts several decades. Hence, mortgage loans are provided over terms of 15 and 30 years. Home loans provide a potential interest expense deduction, which you don't receive with an auto loan. Then there's also the difference in terms of who owns the asset. When you borrow money for an auto, the lender retains title until you pay it off. When you buy a home, you actually take title, and the bank takes a lien against the property. So, ask yourself, where are you better leveraged? Note of how much time it would take to acquire the asset. How long would it take you to pay cash for that car that costs $10,000 versus $100,000 for a home? Using leverage in both cases speeds up time to acquire the asset, but the financial impact is not the same. Now, the second sword is booming or busting returns. By borrowing funds, the investor can control a larger amount of assets than they would if they relied solely on their own funds. This provides a tremendous opportunity to magnify gains over time. For example, if you invested $10,000 of your own money in $90,000 via a mortgage, you could purchase a home with a market price of $100,000. Then the gains or losses are based on the $100,000 investment. So if your investment return in this market is, say, 5%, after a year, your $100,000 home becomes $105,000, making you a $5,000 gain. The initial $10,000 investment has provided you with a 50% return in just 1 year. Now let's say you purchased the home for $10,000 cash. While the asset supports still a 5% return, your $10,000 investment has only yielded $500 in return. Now, it's a two-way street because the value of the asset could go higher, but it could also stay the same, and it could go lower. Now, if you paid $100,000 for an asset, but the true market value was only $90,000, then you technically have a $10,000 loss on your books. Should you have to sell it immediately just due to hardship or sometimes financial circumstances? If you lost 5% on your $10,000 home or $500, if times are tough, you could ignore the loss or just move out and rent the home, or just give it some more time for that asset to recover. Third B, budgeting cost. While leverage can amplify profits, it can also increase your cost of investing. As long as you're borrowing the money in the form of a mortgage, interest is accruing daily, and you'll have to pay that back in monthly installments until it's all gone. As mortgages are structured, you're going to have to pay back the bank the principal amount plus interest regardless of the performance. So in that last example, you borrowed $90,000, say at 8%, and over 30 years means that the bank billed you $7,173 of an interest expense for that period. So you owe that to the bank regardless of your value increasing, decreasing, or staying the same. It's important to think about how long you're going to hold on to that asset, and using that $100,000 purchase price, the interest expense in year one has already eclipsed your $5,000 appreciation for that period. Thus, the importance of amortization when using leverage. You're going to pay interest, then principal, but as time passes, your interest expense will decrease as your principal contributions will increase. Amortization schedules make a great map for budgeting costs. All of you homeowners out there already know that interest expense is just one of many when it comes to owning real estate. There are other costs that you're going to need to factor, so keep that in mind. Fourth sword, beware of risk. Leverage can magnify losses and also the gains. And while it can increase higher returns, it can also increase the risk. If the investment doesn't perform as expected, the borrowed funds still need to be repaid, potentially leading to losses, distress, and maybe even foreclosure. There's always a right amount of risk, but that formula is different for everyone. But when you borrow more against the value of the asset, say $90,000 on the $100,000 collateral value, the bank is taking more of the risk. You can offset the risk by taking less of a loan, say $80,000, which would increase your skin in the game. Or perhaps you can extend the amortization, say from 15 years to 30, which will reduce your monthly expense and thus decrease the risk that if anything goes wrong, like loss of income, it's an easier debt to manage. If you paid cash for the home, the risk is entirely on you. The benefit of not taking a mortgage is that there's no mortgage expense. And if there is any loss, say you overpaid for the property, well, that rests entirely on your shoulders. If you saved up $100,000 to purchase the home without leverage, great. But there's an opportunity cost you need to factor. You lose your job, or banks can't lend at that time. You may have a trapped asset you can't leverage until you sell that home. Or better yet, if real estate goes down and you want to double down, but all your liquidity is sunk into one home, that may limit your ability to acquire leverage on the next home. So it's important to consider tomorrow, but also the long term. There should be some space in between that represents a mix of risk and reward that makes the investment, the return on the investment, and the expense of the investment, and the opportunity cost. So that's the mystery behind leverage. It's neither 100% good or bad, tool or tactic, but it is sharp on both sides and will cut both ways. Like any other tool, the risk and rewards lie within the user. And I'm not going to tell you like Wu told me, but think first before you move. That's all from BBB.